As heat waves intensify across the modern world, homes designed for short-term comfort are becoming traps that store heat rather than release it. Air conditioners strain power grids, interiors overheat overnight, and entire cities retain warmth long after the sun sets. None of this would have surprised medieval builders. For centuries, they constructed homes that remained cool through prolonged summer heat without electricity, fans, or mechanical systems. Their solution was not technological, it was material. Thick clay walls formed the backbone of this approach, and their effectiveness rests on principles modern construction has largely abandoned. Understanding how medieval clay walls worked is not an exercise in nostalgia. It is a practical lesson in thermal survival. How medieval masons understood heat as a slow-moving force. Medieval builders did not think in terms of insulation values or energy efficiency ratings. They thought in terms of time. Heat, they observed, moved slowly through dense materials. Clay, earth and lime absorbed heat during the day and released it gradually at night. This delayed heat transfer meant interior spaces stayed cooler during peak daytime temperatures. A clay wall 1 meter thick could delay heat penetration by many hours. By the time heat reached the interior surface, outdoor temperatures were already falling. The wall then released stored heat outward or into cooler night air rather than into living space. This phenomenon, now called thermal mass, was exploited intuitively and consistently. Why did clay walls perform better than modern lightweight construction, you might wonder? Well, modern walls are thin, hollow, and they're really designed to trap air rather than actually absorb heat. This approach works quite well in cold climates, especially when you've got heating systems running. But you see, during heat waves, this method fails catastrophically. Lightweight walls heat up rapidly, and that means outdoor temperatures are transferred indoors almost immediately. Now, clay walls behave quite differently. Their density allows them to absorb heat energy instead of simply transmitting it. So, the interior temperature changes slowly and predictably, which creates stability rather than those uncomfortable fluctuations. In fact, medieval homes often remained several degrees cooler than the outside air during heat extremes. This wasn't just a happy accident. Builders deliberately selected clay-rich soils for precisely this property. But there's more. Moisture regulation actually amplified these cooling effects. Clay walls did more than just absorb heat, they also regulated moisture. Clay is what we call hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs and releases moisture depending on the humidity levels around it. And as moisture evaporates from clay surfaces, it draws heat away, creating a passive cooling effect that's really quite remarkable. In hot, dry conditions, this evaporation provided a measurable temperature reduction indoors. In humid conditions, clay absorbed excess moisture, preventing the stifling heat associated with trapped humidity. Modern sealed walls eliminate this exchange, trapping heat and moisture inside. That's, why medieval homes were designed as systems, not just as shells. Clay walls were actually part of an integrated approach. Small windows reduced solar gain, while deep roof overhangs shaded the walls. Thick floors anchored interior temperatures, and ventilation paths allowed night air to flush stored heat out of the structure. The wall really did the heavy work. The other features just fine-tuned the performance. Modern homes rely on machines to correct poor design. Medieval homes, on the other hand, relied on materials to prevent the problem in the first place. So, how can we, apply this medieval knowledge to our modern homes today? Well, rebuilding entire homes with clay walls is honestly unrealistic for most people. But the core principles are still quite applicable. For instance, adding interior clay or earthen plasters to existing walls can increase the thermal mass significantly. Even just a few centimetres of clay plaster, believe it or not, can slow heat transfer in a measurable way. Rammed earth feature walls, clay-based renders and adobe partitions can actually be integrated into modern structures without needing to alter the foundations at all. These elements absorb heat during the day and then release it slowly, which helps reduce those pesky peak indoor temperatures. And when you combine external shading with internal thermal mass, you can in effect recreate that medieval performance, but using modern layouts. Now, passive cooling routines mattered just as much as the materials themselves. Medieval occupants worked with their walls, not against them, you see. Windows were opened at night to purge the built-up heat and closed during the day to preserve the cool air inside. Activities that generated heat were carefully scheduled for the mornings and evenings, and, quite sensibly, cooking was done outside or in detached kitchens during the summer months. These habits, really amplified the effectiveness of clay walls. Modern homes can actually replicate this by managing airflow intentionally, rather than just relying on constant mechanical cooling. It's worth remembering thermal mass only works when paired with disciplined ventilation. Why did clay walls outperform stone in heat waves? Well, stone was used extensively in medieval construction, but clay-rich materials often perform better in extreme heat. Stone, you see, conducts heat faster than clay, especially when it's dry. On the other hand, clay's microstructure slowed heat movement and enhanced moisture interaction. In regions with intense summer heat, such as southern Europe and the Middle East, earthen construction dominated for this very reason. Builders adapted materials to climate rather than imposing uniform styles. This regional intelligence, sadly, has largely been lost. So, why do modern building codes, tend to overlook the importance of thermal mass? Well, contemporary regulations mostly prioritize the thickness of insulation, rather than the ability of materials to delay heat flow. Materials are judged by how much heat they can stop, rather than how slowly they transmit it. This sort of bias, honestly, ends up favouring lightweight systems that are optimised for winter heating, rather than for keeping buildings cool during the summer. As heat waves increase, this approach, it really shows its limits. Medieval builders, you see, optimised for survival across seasons, not just for energy bills alone. Reintroducing thermal mass into design, in fact, corrects this imbalance. What medieval clay walls teach about climate resilience is honestly quite profound. Clay walls represent a philosophy rather than simply a technique. They accept environmental reality and respond passively rather than aggressively. They require no energy input and, importantly, do not fail during power outages. As modern societies confront rising temperatures and grid instability, these qualities, they matter again. Understanding how medieval clay walls worked does not mean abandoning modern life. Instead, it means reclaiming knowledge that solved the same problems under, frankly, harsher conditions. If you value serious historical insight with real-world relevance, I encourage you to support the mission of this channel. Subscribe to Echoes of Valor, share this guide with fellow history and preparedness enthusiasts, and help ensure these proven ideas from the past remain part of our future.